There was a small issue. Hold on one second. And all right, welcome to another edition of the Hardwood Huddle. My name is Randy Zellea from backsportspage.com. With me always is the Sith Lord himself, young Vader, the young Jedi, Mr. Bill Ingram. And we have some great guests with us right now from the Salt Lake Tribune, Eric Walden, and the Utah Faithful. He's representing, he is the voice of the fandom, and that's Matt Garlick. Guys, thanks for joining us on the Huddle. Welcome to the Huddle, and it's good to have you here on today's episode, talking everything Utah Jazz. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to start this, but right now the Jazz stand fourth in the Western Conference. Last season they were I guess they were leading the race, number one seed at the point. So, I want to jump right over to Eric. Eric, what is the major difference from last year's team to this year's team, as they're in first last season at this time? Right now they're sitting in fourth place. Talk to me from that perspective. What's going on?
Yeah, honestly, it's been kind of a downhill slide a little bit. I don't want to like make it sound too crazy, because I mean they're 29 and 16, they're fourth in the West, but the defense has not been on the same level as it was a year ago. We had a franchise that several seasons ago was very defensive oriented, and then after playoff losses to the Golden State Warriors, to the Houston Rockets. Then general manager Dennis Lindsey decided we just don't have the offensive firepower to keep up with those teams. So dramatic switch. They trade for Mike Conley. They sign Bojan Bogdanovic. The offense takes off. The pendulum swung maybe a little bit too far that first season, and they dropped out of being a top 10 defense for the first time in several years. Couldn't stop anyone. Last year, they seemed to have finally found that balance a bit. Top 10 in both offense and defense in the league. Things are looking good. Number one seed in the Western Conference. And then, ill-timed injuries to Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley in the playoffs that really kind of did them in. This year, the defensive intensity is just it's not there, and you got to wonder. Does this go beyond the fact that they maybe just need another perimeter piece, that they need another guy capable of defending multiple positions? It's kind of a team that feels a little bit in disarray right now, in terms of they seem to be playing a little too much individually rather than collectively.
I think that's what you see. I mean, from my standpoint, I pay a lot of attention to the Jazz because a friend of mine's in their front office. And I joke with him because mysteriously, not long after I pointed out how great Mike Conley would be at point, oh my God, they've dealt for Mike Conley. And similar with Jordan Clarkson, I was, man, if you just had a little firepower off the bench, somebody ought to help Jordan Clarkson get out of Cleveland. And whoa, not long after that, I was like, should I get some commission on those deals? I love the construction of the team on paper. I look at them and I think, I figured the Warriors would be the top seed in the West with Steph at full strength and Clay returning and those young guys that have matured, Jordan Poole. They're just we on this show we picked the Warriors to win the West, but I really thought they'd have a fight with them, with the Utah Jazz in the Western Conference Finals. And the Utah, especially with Rudy Gay, I thought, man, you've tweaked it, and Rudy Gay can do so many different things, veteran presence, the Andre Iguodala of the Warriors type thing. And then you watch them and it's like, the pieces are here. You don't look at them and go, you just got to trade for a bleep. You don't do that. All the talk about Jeremy Grant, I think, really, you want to disrupt what's happening here to that extreme to bring in a totally different dynamic as a starter. But I wonder, I'm not someone, Matt and I had this conversation earlier on Twitter. I'm not someone who says you got to fire the coach. But I'm wondering if it's time to make a change at coach to get their attention.
And I got to bring up one point too, Eric, before you respond to it. One piece that's gone from last year that has been a fixture with this franchise has been Derek Favors, which gives you extra rebounding help and a little firepower off the bench with rebounding and scoring. Derek Favors has been a part of this franchise for a very long time and has been able to contribute in a very positive way for them. So, Eric, now that you can retort, I just wanted to throw that piece. You take Derek Favors out, you're putting Rudy Gay in. It's an obvious difference.
Well, so they were without Derek Favors for a previous season as well. They traded him to New Orleans in a move to free up cap space to bring in Bojan Bogdanovic. Wound up signing Ed Davis to a free agent deal. He didn't work out. Tried to promote Tony Bradley to be that backup center. He didn't work out. Brought back Fave last year and got off to a good start, and then really just seemed to physically decline as the year went on. I think they had pretty instant buyer's remorse in terms of giving him that 2+1 deal that they did to bring him back in free agency. In terms of replacing him this year, this is a team that values size, that values, having that drop big center, right? And so obviously the problem in the past has been, what do you do when Rudy Gobert goes to the bench? Hassan Whiteside's been pretty solid in that role, especially bringing him in on a flyer of a 1-year veteran's minimum contract.
I was about to say that, yeah. You don't get to say that too often when you say Hassan Whiteside's been serviceable.
Right.
Like, we'll say that for a long time.
When they made that signing, there were so many questions about, like, okay, this is different. This is taking a chance. But for a veteran's minimum, like, if he winds up being a disruption, if he winds up not having it, you cut bait and you go try someone else. He's been pretty decent for most of the year. The problem remains, like, the playbook that the Clippers threw out at them last year, with a small ball, 5-out switchable lineup, the Jazz still don't really have a great answer for. That was supposed to be the point of bringing in Rudy Gay, just given that he spent a significant amount of time with the Spurs last year, kind of playing that role. The Jazz sign him, and then we learn we learned at the beginning of training camp, he had this heel surgery that we didn't know about, right? And he's going to miss time. So he misses training camp, right? Like, he's not, he's bonding with the guys, but he's not able to kind of fully integrate and absorb Quinn Snyder's system, which I think we can all acknowledge takes a significant amount of time to really kind of learn everything there is to that. So there's that problem. And then on top of that, he's 35 or 36 at this point. So you see flashes of the athleticism, but he's lost some of the juice. And then this team is just so conditioned to, like, feeding guys to Rudy, and then them defending the 3-point line, that all of a sudden you start trying to play a small ball lineup, and, like, those habits are hard to break. And all of a sudden they're feeding guys to Rudy Gay instead of Rudy Gobert, and he's not a rim protector at all. So they're having difficulty with that. Just the fact that they play Rudy Gobert and Hassan Whiteside as much as they do, they've acknowledged we haven't spent enough time practicing this small ball lineup as we need to make it work yet, to make it workable yet. So there's that. In terms of Quinn, I've been a pretty staunch Quinn defender. I mean, I don't, people say, okay, maybe you need to switch coaches because he's such an offensive guy, right? And I don't think anyone will dispute that his strength is on the offensive side. But again, this is a guy who coached this team when the personnel was different to, like, a year-over-year top 3 defensive ranking for, like, 3-4 seasons, right? Just back when Gordon Hayward was the focal point of the team offensively, and they weren't going to put up 120 points a game. So I think he's got the defensive acumen. I think it's honestly just, like, personnel issues. Like, I'm with you, Bill. Like, I looked at this team in the preseason, and on paper, I'm like, okay, wow, they checked this box. They ticked this box. They've got more lineup versatility. They've got, you would think they've got everything they need in place to do it, but then you get into the season and you realize all these other teams that are playing small ball lineups, they've got guys who are, between 6'5" and 6'9", and the Jazz are trying to do it with, God, the numbers change every time I see him, but like, can we say that Donovan Mitchell is 6'1" and Mike Conley is 6 foot? Like, it's hard to play a small ball switching lineup with guards who are 6'1" and 6 feet tall. So honestly, if there's been one fault of Quinn, it's that he maybe is just like a little too devoted, a little too rigid with these lineups, where he's not maybe like, let's start seeing them practice the small ball lineup more, because they're going to need it. Let's start seeing them, pull the plug on Jordan Clarkson the other night when he's shooting 2 for 13 and playing 0 defense, and say, let's throw Eric Pascal out there and switch up the lineups and the rotations a little bit and try something different, because Quinn, he loves his rotations. He loves putting guys in at certain times of the game, depending on matchups. And he isn't a huge fan of throwing guys in together who haven't spent much time playing together. But at this point of the season, having lost 6 of 7 and seeing clear deficiencies on the defensive end, you got to try something different.
Well, I think this is, Matt, we're going to go to you next. One thing that I learned so much when I began covering the NBA, Jerry Sloan was still the coach of the Jazz. And while I was never a Jazz fan, growing up in Houston, of course, they're the enemy, right? But once I got past the fandom and just became an analyst, I learned so much from Jerry Sloan. And one of the things that he said all the time that I just love is that your offense is going to come and go. I don't care how great you are at shooting the ball. There are going to be nights where you don't shoot well and you have to win another way. There don't have to be nights where you're bad defensively, because defense is just effort. It has nothing to do with what anybody else is doing. It is strictly your decision to play hard on the defensive end, and you should not have nights off. And the fact that we're seeing that, that's what makes me think, is Quinn's voice eroding to the point that maybe a different voice is needed? Matt, you had a hot take on the coaching from your standpoint.
Yeah, I've been a massive Quinn defender, because I remember, like Eric was saying, a couple years ago, we were really good on defense, and we were actually playing. I remember playing you guys in the playoffs, and I was just looking at our offense. I'm like, man, how many open looks is Quinn drawing up for this Jazz team? It was like every single play was a wide open look, but we could not make a shot over and over. I'm like, man, if he just had a better personnel to score, that'd be great. And we kind of got that. And so, like, I look at the Denver series, 2 seasons ago, and I'm like, okay, we were up 3-1. Our offense was just like a juggernaut against them. And then something happened. Denver just figured us out. And then we lost by 1 shot, that buzzer beater, or like Conley missing that final shot. So I'm like, okay, Conley wasn't there for the whole series. Okay, I'll do that. And then I go to the Clippers series, and, last year, Donovan and Conley weren't fully healthy. And so, like, who's to say how that would happen? But the Clippers weren't fully healthy. But I just felt like that game 6, there was just we were up by 25. There was just no in-game adjustment. It was just, I'm going to stick with my scheme, and it's just going to be what it is. And that's kind of where I'm like, based on, Eric, I'm sure you've seen fans lose their minds the last couple of weeks. Just, I've been seeing some crazy takes today, like Donovan and Rudy shouldn't even be all-stars. I'm like, okay, settle down, let's calm down. But like, yeah, just Jazz fans are like in another world right now. So I'm trying to be like somewhat reasonable, but I just don't know like how much more, because typically Utah, we're known for like being loyal to our coaches, right? Like we usually keep our coaches for a long time. I don't know at what point, like how much more can we defend them? Yeah, obviously COVID hit us. We hit the COVID bug, but like, are they just not responding? Is he too? I tweeted this the other day. Is he too nice? Like, is he afraid to bench a guy? Like, Popovich wouldn't do that. Popovich would bench. He would yell at Tim Duncan. He would scream at Ginobili. Like, he would bench guys. Quinn just He's just like Clarkson's having off game, but he's just going to keep shooting out of it. Let's just keep it, be nice. Like when I saw when we played Denver 2 seasons ago, Michael Porter Jr. wasn't playing really good, and Mike Mullen wasn't afraid to like bench him. Mm-hmm. And he made adjustments and he switched up the lineup, and I think they won the series because he wasn't afraid to change, So that's kind of my issue with Quinn is like in game, I feel like he makes a good scheme for the whole game, but if there's in-game adjustments, sometimes I'm just as a fan perspective, I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't know. That's my thoughts on Quinn.
And that's how you win series is with adjustments.
That's too. And first off, I don't know if you heard what I just said before, but Pop benches media members sometimes. That's what he does. That's so. But there's also one other thing too that we also sort of left out is they're fourth in the West right now. Nobody was expecting the Memphis Grizzlies to be as good as they are right now. Nobody was. That was like the unknown thing. And the Phoenix Suns, who everyone thought that they were going to have, I don't want to say a sophomore slump with Chris Paul being there, and they haven't missed a step. And so to the point where the Warriors are number 2, and that's where the Jazz are falling down to 4 behind the Grizzlies. So it's not like the Jazz are in a bad position. They just have to make some minor adjustments. But do you risk, and this is a good question for Eric, because Eric, you're around the team on a daily basis. Is it a chemistry issue? Is it a interchangeable part issue where we make a trade? Or is it something that, maybe a coaching change, like Bill said before, has to get done? So you basically have the 3 choices there. You being around the team every single day, what do you think?
I feel like there's a little bit of a chemistry issue going on right now. I mean, we just not seen these guys connected lately, right? Like there's just been so much individual play. Like the Lakers game, we saw so much selfish offense, right? Like they actually played pretty good defense for most of that game, right? Up until the last like kind of closing stretch with LeBron at the 5 and Stanley Johnson reprising the Terrence Mann role, right? And they held the Lakers to what? Like, the Lakers didn't go off, right? The Jazz had a crappy offensive game because there was a lot. It devolved into hero ball, devolved into this team is built on ball movement, right? On setting screens, creating that much of an advantage, and then swing it until you get a guy with that much of an advantage. And there just wasn't any of that going on. So I feel like there's a little disconnectedness going on right now. And I feel like there is a little roster imbalance, right? Like this is a team that like who are the defenders, right? You've got Rudy Gobert, all-world defender. You've got Mike Conley has had a history of being, a pretty good perimeter defender, but again, he's mid-30s and he's 6 feet and he can play perfect defense on some guys and they're going to shoot over him. Royce O'Neal, that's considered their next best defender, right? He's had an incredibly inconsistent season. He's always had limitations, right? Where he's better on bigger wings, and then you ask him to chase around smaller, shiftier guards, the Jamal Murrays of the world, and you see what happens there. He struggles. And then beyond that, like Donovan Mitchell, like despite being drafted with a reputation as a defender at Louisville, he's never been a defender in the NBA. Jordan Clarkson has been a terrible defender for his entire time in the NBA. Bojan Bogdanovic, like I think he got some praise back when he was with the Pacers and he was fending off LeBron James for a 7-game series or whatever. Other than that, he's not a defender. Joe Ingles has like there's a reason he's called Slow-Mo Joe and has been for years. He might be the slowest player in the NBA right now, right? And you can see him getting slower before your eyes. Like I love Joe. Joe's an incredible interview. He's very honest. He's very straightforward. Once he gets his sarcastic shtick out of the way first, he gives you incredibly insightful answers. But like, he can't stay in front of anyone at this point. And so you get to a point where they maybe just need to kind of consider what minor moves can we make? I don't love the idea of the Jeremy Grant move. I don't see that. Like, people proposing like a Jeremy Grant for Bojan Bogdanovic swap, right? I feel like you're taking such a hit offensively and not getting enough of a bump defensively with that move. I think there are more minor moves to make where can you move Joe Ingles? Can you maybe move Jordan Clarkson for guys who are better point of attack defenders who are still capable of hitting occasional threes for you, who are capable of fitting into Quinn's system and moving the ball and finding the open man. And then when it comes to them and it's their turn to shoot, can they knock it down? So there are definite moves to be made. There are definite defensive limitations to this team as it exists right now.
How about Eric Gordon? I say that as he's not saying he wants to be traded. He's saying the opposite. I don't know that they're shopping him, but
isn't that the sign though that you want to be traded?
As
I'd take him over Clarkson as a fan, but I would. But
Eric Gordon for Clarkson, that's a tweak. You're getting a much smarter veteran who is not going to jack up bad shots.
He can play defense better.
I feel like Jordan Clarkson has gotten so much hate. Like, let me play Jordan Clarkson advocate for just a minute. And like, I say this with like total grain of salt because I recognize like he has been not great this season. Like, the defense is what it is, and you accept that with the knowledge that like, okay, he's going to give you something offensively, but like the offensive numbers have cratered so badly this year. Like, the guy's in his head, but there was a reason they brought him in at a certain point and why he was so effective and valuable in that role, which was like they had nobody at the time capable of getting them consistent buckets off the bench. Like George Niang was their top bench scorer at the time, right? And so it was kind of funny. Like, Bill, you brought up like telling someone in the Jazz front office, like, hey, what about Jordan? Like, I've been like, just even before I started covering this team, like just watching them from afar, there were several years where I was like, man, these guys could use like a Lou Will, Jordan Crawford, like,
Jamal Crawford.
Crawford. Sorry, not Jordan Crawford. Jamal Crawford type. A guy capable of just like saying, screw the system. Like, I'm capable of going out there and buying you some buckets at needed times. And
you can't start that guy, but off the bench.
Jordan was great at that last year. He's been not nearly as efficient at it this year. So I understand why fans are frustrated because, a year ago, 6th man of the year level play. This year, he's shooting, 31% from three, like 37% overall. Like, all his worst instincts have just, like, gone up a level this year.
If Matt, I was going to say, Matt, I got to ask here before you jump on that. I have to ask from the fan perspective. I don't know if you're a season ticket holder or not, but if you're someone who goes to a lot of games and you watch this team religiously, from the fan perspective, what are you seeing? From we're dissecting the things that are bothering us. What are you seeing from the positive side that you're talking to other fans about with this team right now?
Like a positive side?
Yeah.
Is there a positive side right now?
I mean, it's all hell is breaking loose. The only positive side I've seen lately is like, I think, more fan. I don't know if you've noticed this, Bill. I mean, I don't know if you guys follow Jazz Tour. I'm sure Eric has. There's like this almost civil war amongst Jazz fans. It's either Team Rudy or Team Donovan. Mm-hmm. And I think more people have come to appreciate Rudy as of late.
Well, they didn't have him, and they were just dismal.
There's been that. Right now, there's a ton. I mean, I've barely seen any positive. And I follow a lot of Jazz accounts. There's barely any. The only silver lining is like we just haven't. Just COVID. We honestly haven't had our full squad together in like 2 weeks or so, 2.5 weeks, and like every little piece really matters. I mean, when you take Rudy out, Hassan Whiteside actually does make a pretty big difference, and he's been a big key factor this year because he's still a big, and we're still trying. Eric said this earlier. We're still trying to figure out this small ball lineup, and it just hasn't been super effective. So he hasn't really played the last 2 weeks since subbing in for Rudy, and then Rudy misses games, and then obviously it's no excuse to losing. No offense to your Rockets, but we should have won last night. But Donovan wasn't playing. Donovan is a big key to our offense. We missed. There was like a whole 5 minutes where we couldn't get a bucket. And I'm like, well, Donovan, he's an elite scorer. So it's like, that's like that was the positive thing I actually tried to tweet today. I'm like, I think we'll be okay because we haven't been together. But only thing I'm seeing is like, there just hasn't been a lot of effort, like defense. A lot of it's just, we're not asking Donovan and Jordan and Mike to be like Kobe Bryant on defense, but just give effort. Just be in the right place at the right time. Just give more effort. Like really, that's obviously easier said for me sitting on my couch telling him that. It's hard when he's an elite scorer and he gives a lot of effort, but that's just the biggest frustration. It's just only one that can defend is Rudy. No one can defend. Like literally no one can defend on the team. And then everyone really, really wants Eric Pascal to play more because he's a big body and he does give a lot of effort when he plays. Is he the solution to the Jazz problems? I don't know. Should Quinn maybe experiment with him a little bit more? I think so, but I don't know. I don't know if that answered your question, Randy. I'm just being honest with you. There's not really a lot of positivity like at all in any Jazz account. I tried to be kind of positive, but I'm even pretty negative.
They seem to be commit suicide after last night's loss to Houston.
My Twitter account is like the aftermath of like a nuclear apocalypse in the wake of every Jazz loss at this point, right? Like and part of the problem is like I came into the season thinking the Jazz were well positioned to do well, right? But also I'm cognizant of the fact that they went all out last year for that number 1 seed, like determined to get home court advantage. And then as soon as you get some key injuries at the wrong time, like that's all out the window. And so my expectation this year was we're going to see them take it a little bit easier. They're not going to be quite so, committed to going, running through brick walls to get that top seed. We're going to see them like be a little more casual, sit Mike Conley out, maybe a few more games, rest other guys here and there. The problem is, like, in the meantime, you're seeing the Jazz lose a game, blow a 22-point lead to the Pistons. You're seeing them fall apart against the Pacers. You're seeing them kind of sleepwalk through the first half against the Rockets, turn it on in the first half of the third quarter, race out to a 13-point lead, and then be like, all right, cool. We did what we needed to. And then next thing you know, 15-0 run, and it's like, oh, now we've got a game, and the problem is, like, in all of these games, in the aftermath, you're hearing Quinn and company say, so long as we're, healthy and playing well when the playoffs come around, we'll be good. And, fans in the meantime are like, we're going to these games, we're showing out money for tickets. We'd like to see you like put a little effort into like winning some of these. Like they've lost 3 straight at Vivint Arena. This used to be a team that's had seasons where they didn't lose 3 home games all season long. And now it's just kind of like I think the problem is fans feel like there's not enough accountability. There's too much saying, well, we'll be fine down the road. And in the meantime, they feel like it's the same excuses over and over post game. We didn't defend well enough. We didn't communicate enough. We weren't connected enough. The ball movement needs to be better. It's the same thing. Like they can dissect the problem without fail every single time, but then you see the same problems repeated over and over, and fans are like, "I'm tired of hearing it." I'm sick of hearing you say this is what's gone wrong and not fixing it.
I think the problem with that mentality, if we can turn it on when the playoffs start, and hey, maybe they do, but what you do during the regular season is develop habits. And I don't think you can go a long stretch of games, certainly a season, kind of deciding to take quarters off or take halves off. And then the playoffs start. Those habits are going to get you. They're going to come back to bite you. I don't subscribe to the idea that you can do that and then switch to do something completely different when the playoffs start. That I think, and you know what, we're at the midpoint of the season. It's not time to hit the nuclear button. But it is worrisome for a team that's been elite when you watch them just not care for large stretches of games.
Well, and two things I'll say about that real quick. One, that's been a consistent talking point of Rudy Gobert, right? Like, especially in the aftermath of that 5-game stretch he missed where their defense just absolutely cratered, right? He comes back, he has that infamous news conference where he drops the winning habits line where he kind of infamously praises Devin Booker of all people, and so like clearly taking a shot at Donovan, right? And his whole thing in that, what got obscured in that was we need to have these habits, right? Habits. He kept using the word habits. And then the next day we're talking to Don and we're talking to JC, and you hear JC say, yeah, I think we sometimes get into the mentality of like realizing that our offense is so great that like we can just outscore people and like who cares about defense. And this is where you're seeing, everyone just kind of, whether it's players versus fans or whether it's Rudy versus other players, this is where the disconnect is happening, where he's preaching we need to have some urgency about this right now, and we're just not seeing it from all sides of the team.
Well, I think I think Eric and Matt, you're giving us a lot of good insight from the Utah perspective. Me being out in the East Coast for where the Nets and the Knicks are, obviously we have our own problems out here. we can't even get our superstars vaccinated to stay on the court. That's another issue for another time. I guess I'll give everybody a sort of I'll give you each an opportunity to sort of sound off of what you think the second half of the season is going to bring for the Jazz. I'll give my perspective. It seems like they have the issue, from what you're telling me, of thinking they can just turn it on when they need to. And that's a problem. For every NBA franchise, you can't just turn it on when you need to turn it on. Even the Bulls weren't able to do that. Michael Jordan would never allow the Bulls to just turn on the switch when they need to. So I guess, my thing is this is a very talented team without a household superstar name. Donovan Mitchell is a great player. Rudy Gobert are great players. But on the East Coast here, it's not the first names you think of when you think of NBA elite players. So with that being said, I think a deep playoff run is what the Jazz need. And I think that Mitchell and Gobert need to sort of get on the same page and lead this team. And maybe bring in a veteran who has playoff experience to help teach this team on what they have to do to win the next level. Eric, I'll go to you first. What do you see for the second half for the season for Utah Jazz?
Well, they haven't done themselves any favors with the stretch, right? Like this stretch that they just had, the one where they've been struggling, should have been the part of the season where they were fattening up on poor teams and like bolstering their record, right? Like they should have been feasting on the Pacers and Rockets and Pistons of the world. They've got the Pistons coming to town tomorrow night, and then after that, they're at Golden State, they're at Phoenix. Phoenix comes here, they're at Memphis, they're at Minnesota. Like, right? And playing the way they are right now, like if they don't get their stuff together, like how many of those games do they win, right? Like who knows how long this slog goes on? Because they wasted the opportunity to put together some wins and to kind of solidify their place in the conference with this ill-timed stretch. So they need to get it together quickly. We need to see kind of a meeting of the minds between offense and defense. We need to see guys get back to playing together. Like, okay, I expect Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck are going to make a move before the trade deadline. At least one, maybe two. Like it's clear the personnel just has too many deficiencies. So we'll see how much they shake things up, who they can bring in. If they make a huge move, I'll be shocked. Well, not shocked, but I more anticipate them making, complementary moves to kind of bolster what they've got, and bring in some guys who have a little bit of defensive attitude. Guys who are a little bit more tone setters, guys who can augment what the message that Rudy Gobert is trying to spread and say, yeah, we need to turn things up on that side of the ball if we're going to win a championship. And then beyond that, yeah, we'll see what it comes down to. We'll see. We've seen that this is a team that has a ton of offensive talent that can outscore a lot of teams in the league, but that they're also susceptible to being schemed against. So can we see them get that small ball working on both sides? Can we see them score with it? Can we see them defend with it? That's going to be a huge thing because that teams are going to be throwing that at them. I still think that this is a team that if they can get it together, they've got enough talent to compete for a title, but everything's got to be working because they don't have, like you mentioned, Randy, good as Donovan and Rudy are, and as appreciated as they are here in Utah, they're not on that level of a Giannis. They're not on that level of a Kevin Durant. They're not on that level of a Steph Curry where they can single-handedly change the outcome of a game consistently. And so you need Bojan Bogdanovic engaged. You need Mike Conley engaged. You need Royce O'Neal being willing to, consistently fire up the open looks he's getting, and you need him to be re-engaged on the defensive end. You need Joe Ingles playing at a higher level. You need the Jordan Clarkson of last season because what he's giving you right now is worthless, and worse than worthless. It's harmful at a lot of times. So
15 against the Rockets.
Yeah. So if they can figure all of that out, yeah, they can still make some noise, but it's a big ask right now.
Matt, you can go next.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Jazz with this current roster, they have enough talent. Everyone has to be fully locked in, and for 48 minutes every night, and we haven't seen a lot of that this year. So I'm kind of, I don't know. I would be shocked if Danny Ainge doesn't make some kind of move to alter something before the deadline, but we'll see. But I tweeted this the other day. Part of me thinks that for the Jazz to go far though, because unless they just dial in, they're gonna need some Phoenix Suns luck from last playoffs, and just every series they play is there's an injury or something. I mean, I'm not trying to discredit Phoenix, but they did have some series of very fortunate events.
Please note that the views of Matt are not exactly the same. So if you're in Phoenix and you're listening, send your hate tweets to Matt, okay?
No, but I think Phoenix and Golden State are in another level. The Jazz are just not there. They're so intense. I have a lot of respect. The one player I miss Jazz just don't really have a player like that, is I really miss Jay Crowder. I miss the grit. I don't miss him shooting 15 threes a night, but I miss his toughness. I just miss, there's no one really on the Jazz that can get in a fight with somebody. I'd miss that. I wish the Jazz had somebody that could just kind of like a Pat Beverly or a Jay Crowder, someone that would just stand up. That I feel like Donovan showed that more in his first few seasons. He was just kind of more tough, but I just kind of feel like everyone's just too nice, and just Quinn's just too nice, and it's just they play like they've done this before, but they haven't. So I think they can, and I think but it's just going to be a very collective effort with all of them together. And if there's any Phoenix Suns fans listening, hey, I have a ton of respect. I'm jealous of your franchise. I wish my Jazz could get there and figure that out. And go. When I look at Memphis, Phoenix, and Golden State, they're just dialed in and hungry. And Jazz were hungry last year, but this year I don't know. They're kind of just maybe they're just feeling so much pressure to go far that they're just kind of like losing. I don't know. I don't really know.
I'll give you
But
Here's kind of an interesting what if.
We
The
need
offseason that the Jazz went after Mike Conley, what if they had found out a way to pull off Chris Paul instead, right? Like, is that like we keep talking about this Jazz team being a finesse team, being a team full of nice guys. Mike Conley's a guy who, like, very famously has never had a technical foul in his career.
Yeah.
And Chris Paul is a guy who, like, wound up on, getting thrown out of Houston because James Harden couldn't put up with him, like, pushing him. And then he goes to Phoenix, a team that was, like, kind of renowned for having talent and famously underachieving every year. And, like, what happens as soon as he gets there? Like, those guys were ready to hear what he had to say, and he took them to another level. And it's an interesting what if, The Jazz are definitely missing a little bit of edge for sure.
Rudy's life would be a dream if we had Chris Paul. His life would be.
Oh God,
He'd be probably averaging 20 a game if we had Chris Paul on our team. He'd have so many easy looks.
I agree.
Yeah.
Factor that you're talking about, we've seen in Texas quite a bit because the Spurs had Bruce Bowen, and then the Rockets and Blazers had Mario Elie, just amazing intensity, toughness in the playoffs. And Dallas had Jason Terry, who, as much as Dirk was amazing in the year they won the finals, Jason Terry is the reason. I was in that locker room every night, and Dirk is underrated in every way. He's an amazing person, an amazing player. But Jason Terry was the edge. He called out LeBron James, and he's the reason, and then torched him. I mean, completely torched LeBron one-on-one, and Jason Terry is about 5'7". I think they list him at 5'10". No. But that guy is the toughest guy I've ever been around. That's the edge that you need. I think something that, Eric mentioned, the NBA season is a crucible. It's not a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a crucible. You go through, you're tested, you're beaten, especially when you were the top seed. You got the target every night, and every team is coming for you. And if you're not ready, you get your ass kicked. And I think the question now, as Eric mentioned, the schedule that's coming up, the Jazz played down to the level of their competition, and the Rockets were infamous for this during the championship years. They lost games that I was pulling my hair out over games they lost. But then they would beat the Lakers and the Spurs, and what do they rise to this occasion? Do we see that sharpness? Do they come into focus? Do they go, bing, now we're playing the Warriors, now we're playing the Grizzlies, now we're playing the Suns, and we got to bring it? Do they do that? And if they do, 2 weeks from now, we're having a totally different conversation. If they don't, at the same time, Danny Ainge, I don't know of too many people who I have less confidence in ability. When you talk about Dennis Lindsey, when you talk about David Morway, you're talking about two guys who understand culture, who understand what it takes to build a winner. And Danny Ainge, good luck with that.
Danny pulled off a couple trades back in 2008 that got that team a championship. They haven't done it since.
Nope.
So with that being said, guys, you're listening to the Hardwood Huddle, courtesy of backsportspage.com and Cave Talk Radio. Bill Ingram, we have Matt and Eric out from Utah. Eric went to Salt Lake Tribune. I'm going to get it right before the show's over, I promise. And and Matt's one of the representing the Utah faithful. Guys, I want to thank you guys for coming on the show tonight. Bill and I really appreciate it. We're sort of changing our format up a little bit, and we're going to focus team by team instead of jumping around the league. And I'm glad that we were able to sort of focus on the Jazz tonight. And Eric, I'm going to give you the opportunity to plug and shill where people can find you, and let everybody know where they can find you right now online.
Thank you, Randy. Yeah, I'm on Twitter at TribJazz, TRIBJAZZ, and you can read all of my work at sltrib.com. That's SL as in Salt Lake, Trib, TRIB, short for Tribune.com.
You can tell I'm from Jersey, right? Because I like, oh, so, what? There's some salt, pepper. Wait, what? What the heck's going on? And Matt, feel free to plug away. If people want to find you on Twitter, go ahead.
Matty G43, just spelled like the MATTY G 4 FOR 3. Pretty simple.
And of course, Mr. Ingram.
At the Rocket Guy, as I have been since Twitter was invented, and my business partner at the time was like, "We should join this Twitter thing," and I was like, "Why?" But back in the days when we were building Hoops World, and of course, the first team I covered was my hometown Houston Rockets. So there you go.
And of course, I'm Randy BSP. Instagram and Twitter, backsportspage.com is where you can find us. And Bill, we're just on a quick side note. The boys are back in town. The Prabat and the rest of the crew are starting up another basketball podcast. We're going to be supporting them. They're going to be supporting us. So we're going to be doing some different things with them, going in and out. So, guys, I want to thank you guys for joining us on the Hardwood Huddle. We really appreciate it. We'll be back next Thursday, focusing on the Atlanta Hawks. You want to talk about a team that you probably need to get a bottle of Jack Daniels if you're to watch. Poor Nate McMillan. That's all I have to say. For Randy Zellea, I'm Bill Ingram. This has been the Hardwood Huddle.
You're Randy Zellea. I'm Bill Ingram.
Listen, it is 5 degrees in my studio right now. It is.
And you're both from St. Louis.
I don't know how cold it is in Utah right now, but it is 20 degrees on the other side of that door. So we appreciate you guys coming on. We'll see everybody next week on the Hardwood Huddle.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.